So, hello and welcome to the overview of an N-scale layout that was laid out on a table. We'll talk about it a little bit. The inspiration for this came from the Denver South Park and Pacific and Colorado and Southern Railway lines that ran in the Colorado Rockies from 1880 to 1920. Those railroads took their name from the fact that the main line from Denver ascended the Platte Canyon up into the Rocky Mountains into South Park, Como, and Fairplay. The railroad was eventually sold to Colorado and Southern, and then at that point it went out of business. This is a layout that is a table layout, and as a table layout it is 3 feet 6 inches by 7 feet, and it's built entirely on and out of a foam insulation board that was built. KATO track was utilized. The reason was KATO was easy to model and it's uniform. No roadbed work. I've been there, done that, and we'll talk about that a little later. Firm railroad bed on foam board, which was really a plus, and in the end the overall cost was not that dramatically different. So the cross switches, by the way, also allowed me to do quite a layout. Here's what the layout looks like today. In my mind it's about 80% finished, and so for the next few minutes I'm going to be quiet and let you listen and watch a run-by of the various trains in different sections of the layout. So when I said the layout is all, the track is all put onto the foam surface, that is a true statement. When I said been there, done that, I'd previously done the woodwork and track laying, the cork laying, the track laying, and the ballasting, and in the end the costs weren't that different. But one of the problems of building on foam is I needed a stable guide to a track base, and the KATO track provided that to me. So as you're looking at this, understand it's all stock KATO track. And from there, it just really helped make the layout work. As you watch the videos, I'll admit I've got 3 sections of track that I think I'm going to need to pull up and smooth out a little bit, because you can't control it as well as you can when you do it on a wood surface. But in the end, the overall effect I was actually extremely happy with. So the train now is stopping to pick up passengers and some mail and a few different things here in a mountain town, and we'll talk about each of these areas respectively later in the video. But I wanted you to get a feel for what the running of the trains look like. In this layout, because N-scale doesn't give you a lot of options for things, we had to pretend. These are particularly German locomotives, and you'll see some locomotives that a friend of mine picked up when he was over working in Japan. The buildings are almost all European buildings that were purchased in Germany and Austria, and were then trimmed and worked up to look like mountain cabins and the type of structures you would see in the mountains. And like I said, there isn't a single bit of plaster work, by the way, on this layout. Everything you're seeing in terms of the features and the cliffs and the mountains are all foam. So as opposed to the layout I did before this, because this is my 3rd layout, it weighed a ton and took 4 people to manhandle. This thing is extremely light, and you have a great ability to kind of move stuff around. So you're going to see some run-bys here of the different locomotives and trains and cars that I have. And I am lucky enough to probably be one of the last surviving people that has N-scale decals for the Denver South Park and Pacific and Colorado and Southern line. I'm sure there are a few out there, but I don't think they make them anymore. When I talk about inspiration, everything you see on this layout, and we're going to go through it area by area, was all brought about by what the Denver South Park and Pacific Line actually did service and what consists they actually got to carry. So from my point of view, I like the way it turned out overall. It's hard to believe that there was no plaster or casting work, and when I say that's all foam, it's all carved foam. And I do have a separate video that actually shows how it was built, because it was basically one big block of foam and then everything was carved away. One thing I want to add, this line you're seeing on the video now was never on the original layout plan, but as I was doing the carving and kind of moving stuff away, I could envision that there was in fact room for another line and another town or feature. And I went onto the software using the KATO track, laid it out, planned it, and then began carving the right-of-way for it. And in the end, it turned out pretty good. So at this point, we got a freight train coming into the main station siding, and then later on we're going to see a passenger train come in and stop by the station. And like I said, later on in the video, we're going to go area by area so you can look at kind of some of the details that were placed in here. I really like the way the engine, how it turned out. When I said I'm 80% finished, I like to do what I call photo ready, where if I place a camera down and take a picture, there's at least a moment where you might think it's real. And my father drove that in me. This is the third layout I've built in my life. And this was the retirement one, and thanks to COVID, although there are very few things to be thankful for related to COVID, COVID did afford a lot of us as model railroaders more time than we thought we would have to work on our layouts. You'll see I have different types of rolling stock, some unusual stuff I've picked up over the years. And so just for fun, I thought I'd go ahead and show you some of that rolling stock as we kind of went through. This is a German locomotive. Ironically, one of the locomotives my uncle used to work on over in Germany. We have some of the old and more simple locomotives that came with some of the Bachmann sets. And tied to that, you're actually going to see a California Zephyr train, which is coming up. Doesn't really belong to the period, but fun to look at. And then just for really fun, we're going to have a run-by of a German passenger train from about the 60s, 70s. So now that's the layout and some of the run-bys. We're going to go through area by area and show you some of the features that are on this. First is Rogers Farm Junction. It was motivated by the fact that the railroad left Denver heading southwest across a lot of fertile farm fields. And this farm literally does everything. The story is it had an apple orchard, but when the railroad came through, a lot of the apple orchard had to move to a different part of the property. But you'll still see a few apple trees. They have cattle, they do milk, they have vegetables. It's a working farm that's along the route. People love to fish in the river that goes by it, and we'll talk more about the fishing later. This is the Crystal River Valley as it cascades down from the mountains. Next, we're going to do John's Gold Mine. The gold and silver were common, along with granite and stone, which cannot be understated. They were mined along the route. Much of the stone quarried actually went to buildings in Denver. And here you can see the area that's labeled as John's Gold Mine. And there's a mine that goes in there, and you'll see they have hauled out a rather small gold nugget that actually is pyrite that I put out there. Roberts Camp is one of the small mining towns that sprang up around the mines along the route. For me, you know, log cabins and things like that in N scale. These actually are Swiss chalets and Swiss buildings that I trimmed and modified to make them look more like rustic cabins. But here you can see there's a working mine that kind of ties in, and there are all sorts of things they pour out. That's me in my cabin in the mountains. I always think of it that way. From there, the idea is to hide things in here for people to find. There are the sheep, there are bears, there are deer. They're hidden throughout. Here the bears are, and what the bears are doing, they're watching the people in a campsite that's up on top of the ridge, and they're being watched by deer and elk that are nearby. And it's fun to put these features in because you want someone to always be looking at it and saying they're discovering stuff. Mia's Lake Resort, as the Denver South Park and Pacific climbed up the Platte River Canyon, it served a hot springs mountain resort called Strontia Springs. It was one of the most popular summer resorts in the Platte Canyon for people of the city of Denver. The tickets were relatively cheap. The resort had hot and cold springs, had a restaurant, had a dance hall, and cabins for rent. So this is my version of that. In here I have built 4 distinct hot springs. One is off the platform when you come in. One goes into a hot tub that's in the center of the feature, and the other 2 are around the lake. So here you can see there's a green grass beach that people can swim from. There's the dance hall and restaurant and picnic area. There you can see the hot tub starting to merge. And from there, I like the way this feature turned out. So now we take you to Carl's coal mine. Coal was one of the minerals that were hauled around. The railroad needed them, the businesses needed them. That was hauled down to Denver. This is one of the ground level shots that I want to get looking really good. The coal mine itself is, in fact, I think it's a French coal mine, but the kit comes from Germany. And so I took off some of the things that made it look more European, made it look more rustic like a coal mine, a working coal mine. And in the end, you'll see the advantage of foam, by the way. I needed room for it. You just carve it out of foam and keep your colors consistent and repaint it, and it works fine. Breetown, there are many mountain towns that sprung up around the area for people who work there and for lodging for visitors. And the line here, Bailey, Grant, Como were kind of examples of the towns that were along the line. Out of this town, you have horseback riding, you have hiking. You can see coal being hauled to and for. It was kind of a center hub for things. Helene's Mountain Resort tourism was in fact a large part of the railroad's business. Along with the route, there were many mountain summer cabins and camps that were built by families from all over the U.S. that would come back every summer. Fishing excursions from Denver would take you up in the morning and bring you back in the evening. Many resorts sprang up along the route to support the tourism trade, and it was routine. The railroads would publish reports weekly, daily on the amounts of trout that were carried out of the mountains by the visitors they carried up. Wildflower Mountain excursions were also extremely popular. This was the feature was completely added, and I didn't see it until I actually started carving it away. But much like mountain towns, it's a working town. It has residences, but it also has boarding houses and hotels. Horseback riding out of the area. People come up to get the fine thin air and escape, so there's little picnic areas and things like that for them to sit and be. See the bears there going for the trash cans. Again, hiding a lot of little things. There are mountain goats actually on the cliffs that you can look for as you kind of go through things. There are shuttered mountain cabins from people who own them, but they don't happen to be there that particular summer. A lot of detail in there. James Lumber Camp. There were several lumber camps that were along the route. An unbelievable demand for wood by the railroads, the mines, local towns, and actually even hauled down to the city of Denver. Interesting about this was a kit came out of Europe. Originally was designed with a water wheel, but there was really no way to put a reasonable water feature in here to work the mill. So the fact we had coal, I converted it to basically a coal-driven lumber yard, and so that was easy. You just stick a straw in the ground and put it next to the building. Then we go to Lisaville. Lisaville was inspired by the west area of Denver, where the Denver South Park and Pacific had its station. We have in here hotels, restaurants, station. We have maintenance facilities and a maintenance yard. And near the hobos on the outside of town camping, we have deer, we have bears. Again, I want someone to sit, look at this table, and always discover something. Fishermen, and we talked a little bit about the fishermen, but fishermen were an important part of the tourism. This is the Union House, the maintenance engine house. This house is my wife's house, but it's also a boarding house. From there we go over to the general store. The general store sells stuff from the Rogers farm, as well as other supplies that are needed at the crossroads on the layout. And then from there we go to the hubbub of activity, which is the station itself for freight and passengers. And then there's a hotel and a restaurant, and we're into Fred Harvey and following the whole saga, although it doesn't belong on the line. The only Fred Harvey restaurant anywhere near Colorado and Southern was actually down in Colorado Springs. But I put it on the layout anyway because I thought it was just cool, and it becomes a conversation piece. And then we have a coaling platform and a water tower that feeds water pipes that are along the side of the track. So that concludes your tour of the layout. Well, I hope you found it interesting. This is the control panel, by the way. I have the ability to supporting 5 independent power packs, so 5 different people can control trains at different times. If you're interested in how it was built, here I have a link and a way to search for it on YouTube, and you can see how the layout itself was built. Other than that, I thank you for spending the time to watch this video. I hope you enjoyed it, found it enjoyable, and most of all, I hope it inspired you to do things with your own model railroad layout. That's it. Take care. Bye-bye.